And let's close our laptops at this point. And turn your attention to our Slim Cost leaders.
Because yeah, so this is topic is biomimicry, and it's essentially about how we can learn about what I kind of thought of as natural and traditional values that you would see in the world. And to put it simply, I think this week's topic is to really investigate how we can learn from nature and from traditions that are rooted in culture that are served to serve everybody, serve people, serve all sorts of beings, and just thinking of ways of how we can adapt things from those to create new futures for our cities. And so as a result, we started looking into discussion posts and feeling that a lot of people would know about how this city can serve as like this one single living organism rather than just a bunch of little things that kind of just combine but not to form one thing. And so I think we were really focused on how we can reimagine the city as like one cohesive living thing. And so that was our first question of what does it mean to design cities as a single living organism? Yes.
You can go into the question a little bit. So as Kevin said, the first question that we decided to ask is what does it mean to design cities as a single living organism? So scroll down to some of the questions that we found in the discussion posts that kind of like went along the topic was one by Fatima was how can we transform current urban infrastructures to more closely emulate the regenerative processes found in natural ecosystems. And one of the responses was actually a response that I had, and it was like to build a city that acknowledges like all these beings and designing for this idea of like having harmony between not just like the humans and the buildings, but also all of the ecosystem, so also animals and like the nature. It's seeing them like it's seeing all of these like things not just as extra parts, but as part of a like community. So we would need to create like a system that reuses like and resources like nature does, like prioritize co-living and educate like the public like how to care and how this like place can be shared. Because like if we don't also like educate people on this, then we can't really come together as a whole and realize like how we can do this together. And it's not like we're forces of nature working against each other, but working with each other.
Should go into topic 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of leading from that, we came up with another topic about empathy and human-centered design, and how that kind of comes from traditional Islamic cities and how they structured their historic cities. So some of the questions that that kind of so like basically traditional Islamic cities, they kind of focused it on human-centered design, sort of like how a living ecosystem would benefit people. So that kind of ties into that. These were some of the questions that we found from the discussion posts. And the ones that we came up with were, how can our urbanism reinforce empathy in both form and function? And we tied another question to, how can past Islamic models help us build more sustainable cities? So that kind of ties into human comfortability and things like that. And these were just some more discussion questions that we found from you guys.
So although the Islamic traditions were used to design, although they weren't, necessarily like, and they weren't necessarily like nature. They used, their surroundings as a way to inspire what they wanted to do. Like for example, like they weren't just designing for people, although that was like their main thing. They were also thinking about like, how can we design a place for, some like animals to like move through and like how can we accommodate for them and for people and I'm guessing or anything else that could also be living, in their cities that can, benefit everybody. And I think that that's something that we could definitely, adapt today and think about how we can start to implement those ideas into our cities. So I would say that, I guess to like wrap up a little bit is, this was really like an investigation into how we can just create cities as like living systems that are, self-sustaining, that can adapt, and, just simply how those can just, how we can just learn from nature and from, precedents like, Islamic time.
So does that cover it? I mean, how about the second question? No, the third question on the right.
This one?
Yeah. This I think is worth digging a little deeper. Did you cover that sufficiently? Do you
I guess
feel?
we could probably go into it a little bit more. So our question is, can cities behave as ecosystems? And I think that they possibly could, but we would need to start to reimagine it. I feel like a lot of cities are kind of just composed of multiple different things. And in order to create something like an ecosystem, we would have to start thinking about how all these different components of the city begin to work together in unison. Kind of like similarly to what I was saying with like think about like the camels, right? That was almost kind of like an ecosystem because it wasn't just people living in one place and like camels living in another place. It was everyone working together, just one one place, or I guess like one ecosystem for living beings.
So did you guys, the three of you, someone's AWOL, but did you read the Spiegelhalter or the Mortada or both? There were two readings, right? What did you guys read?
I had read I don't remember what it was called, but the Islamic reading.
Yeah,
That was the one that
by Mortada.
yeah.
You
I
did?
read that one too.
It's not the real.
I feel like a big thing that like comes from that is like a lot at the beginning of the reading, they talk a lot about like the Quran. And so I think like part of the reason why they have this beautiful urban fabric like within their cities is because they realize that everything like came from one thing. And that one thing created everything that's beautiful to work together.
Yeah,
Which
you're
goes-
respecting the ego.
But I think a lot of people nowadays, like, and we can see it, like within politics right now, people don't see that. People don't realize that we all come from one place, whatever, like what people believe in,
Well, on
right?
Sunday, I believe that,
Yeah,
but 9 a.m. Monday morning, actually, I'm successful, 8 a.m. Monday morning, 5 a.m. Monday morning. I'm making money. But next Sunday, I can admire God's creation. But 5 days a week, 9 to 5, I'm making money. So I'm a good person, but I'm locked into the rules of the operating system. So I think that's a question. Like every question we have for the beginning of the lecture, an hour and a half from now will be a question for you guys. Moving, choosing examples to help us understand. The question that jumps out for me on the board, for us to answer in the lecture and for you guys to respond to in your analysis, is can cities behave as ecosystems? And it's not, it's not just we're not done. When we ask the question, we're not done. It's just the beginning. A more pointed way to ask this question is, for you, what examples do we have of cities performing, changing the rules, changing the urban fabric, changing the way we do things? What are the examples that demonstrate how architecture and urban form can start to behave as ecosystems do. Ecosystems are a model of performance beyond, it's so high performance. Ecosystems are so magically, powerfully self-restoring, they balance forces, everything changes, and then they strike a new equilibrium. Nature is a really powerful performance model compared to capitalism. Capitalism kind of is primitive and a failure. As powerful as capitalism has been, as successful as capitalism has been, ultimately, it's not as high performing as nature. Can we change the rules? What are examples of changing the rules so that our architecture and our living form performs more like an ecosystem? That's the one that jumps out to me. How about you guys? Is this covering it? You good? Covered now. You good? Okay. We have more people now. But if your buddy's not here, text them and say, where are you? Okay. Anything else? Ignacio, anything for you? No. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And I think it's worth reminding us, reminding each other of questions from past weeks that have not yet been answered. Can some of these things help us with housing affordability? Can it help us with gentrification? Can it help us with some of these questions that we've never fully answered from previous weeks? And we might never fully answer, we probably won't, but these are career-long questions that will, that should haunt you, that should follow you, that should excite you for the rest of your careers. And here's a general point. This class can sometimes be a little depressing, you know, because we dare to look at problems. We dare to go outside of the cute little comfort zone of looking at Herzog and de Meuron precedents and saying, oh, that's beautiful. I want to treat it beautiful. Oh, you know, we dare to go beyond the comfort zone that architecture has carved out for itself. I want to design museums and I'll be happy. That's my life work. We dare to go beyond the comfort zone that architecture has carved out for itself. And it can be daunting, it can be terrifying, it can be depressing. But I just want to emulate and reinforce and model for you, there's no more satisfying, no more glorious struggle to be engaged with than these struggles. I feel sorry for the poor architects who go to work at Zaha Hadid's office and never look at real problems. And I'm jealous of our colleagues who go into working at Mass Design Group, who are tackling problems of women's rights in Africa. I'm so jealous that they get to tackle the real big issues that actually will make a difference in the world. Zaha Hadid versus Mass Design Group. I think those are our reference points. Okay. Okay. I also want to say something about what we do on Tuesdays. The shortest way of describing it is we want you to look at actual real world fabrics. We don't want you to look at renderings by architects and analyze the renderings by architects. We want you to capture in these images, choose images that demonstrate how architecture engages urban fabrics and the interplay between streets and districts and buildings, and how that dynamic interplay between specific architectural projects and how they transform the societies around them. We want you to look at actual reality and analyze that actual reality. Then we want you to take the lessons from the analysis and abstract them away from the specific example. So remove the principles, remove the strategies, remove the thinking behind those design decisions. Step aside and generalize it so that they're abstracted and available to be applied to other settings. Does that make sense? That's the goal. And this shouldn't be a difficult thing to understand, the role of analysis on the one hand, and then the diagram principle on the other hand. This is a habit of mind that is at the core of what it means to be a designer, what it means to be an architect. This is what architects do. This is the one thing that makes architects different from other humans. We walk around the world, we look at things. Do you do this? I think you do this. You walk around and you look at the world in a very specific way. And then you learn from your experience of the world, the number one source of all understanding. You bring your architectural skills to understand the world in a way that other people don't have access. That's number two. Remember the first day of class? And then you abstract it, you carry it forward with you as a diagram, as a principle, and you're ready to, when you get the opportunity, you're going to adapt those principles to whatever situation you encounter. That's why we called you. We needed someone to do that. That's what architects do. That's why we called an architect and not an engineer, right? That's what architects do. This assignment is to help you develop and deepen your skills, the habit of mind at the core of what it means to be an architect. You look at the world, you use your architectural skills to figure it out, to interrogate it, and then you carry those lessons with you in a form, a diagram, in a form that allows you to apply it. I'm going to pass around this book. We've seen this book several times this semester. I want you to look at it again. I want you to notice that every single one of the principles that are cataloged in this book, and this is a catalog of principles, starts with an actual real situation, an actual real architectural situation that the world offers us. And it demonstrates what it means to take this evidence, to think through it like an architect, and then at the end, it yields a diagram and a principle, a drawing, a visual and a verbal. Starts with a visual and a verbal analysis, and it ends with a visual and verbal abstraction that invites us to apply it to other situations. This assignment is not a weird thing that is isolated to what you do in the summer of 2025. This assignment is at the core of what it means to be an architect. Really. Can you close your laptop? Thanks. Questions about this?
Yeah.
Okay. The city as an organism, and in four parts. The first part, why is this interesting for practice today?
Can you get the list?
Yeah. So as we've mentioned in the past, this course very much has its roots and its origins in a course taught by Kevin Lynch at MIT for something like 50 or 60 years. And Kevin Lynch summarized the content of the course the way he taught it in this book, Good City Form. And again, you see these diagrams that it boils down to. The clearest remnant of Kevin Lynch's original course is that he would start the semester. He used to, I know, believe it or not, he used to start with the beginning of history and move through history towards the present. Crazy, I know. What we do going backwards is so much better, but he would start with the city as a cosmological model. We're going to do that next week. And then he would say the city as an organism. We're doing that this week. And then the third thing is the city as a machine. We did that last week. So I just want to make you aware that if you're looking for a book that explores some of these issues in a way that resonates with the way we do it, Kevin Lynch, Good City Form. So before we dive into the Islamic city, like why would we learn about the Islamic city? And next week, why would we learn about ancient cities that were designed according to principles of Hinduism or Buddhism or Sufism or all these religious cosmological models? Why would we look at that? Well, in terms of this, the answer to the city as an organism, architects have a capacity because of what we do, because of the way we look at the world. We have a capacity to look at complexity. And architects are expected to make sense of the most complex phenomena we encounter, where other people will say, oh, it's just random. Architects say, random or rules? There seem to be rules about branching. There are forces. I bet I could write a grasshopper code to produce form that matches the rules of this form. Who's with me? Who uses grasshopper? You know what grasshopper is? Grasshopper. Some people know what grasshopper is. It's a way of writing algorithms that generate form. Architects, when the world gives us complexity and we want to figure it out, sometimes we call architects. Wall Street, before we had AI, Wall Street was looking for pattern recognition, and they would sometimes hire architects. The military need help with pattern recognition. They call the architects, and they say, what are the rules that generate this apparently random form? That's what we do. We manage complexity. We understand complexity and we manage it. Have you seen this? So this is simultaneously a question of complexity and emergent form. These are, sometimes we think of emergent form, like there are some rules or there are some forces at work, and form is produced out of those rules or out of those forces unexpectedly. No one could have predicted what the form generated by those rules would be. So this is an example of that. But it's also something that's happening in cities throughout Europe. These flocks of starlings are descending upon the old cities of Europe, and it's become a real issue to the point where they're trying to figure out how to discourage them from flocking around cities. But this is beautiful. It's a choreographic ballet. And if you were called in, if we said, oh, we got to figure this out, let's call an architect. If you're the architect being called in to figure this out, what would you say? What are the forces behind this? How would you How would you explain this phenomenon? How is this produced? Do you have any idea? Yeah,
They know how to function as a whole rather than as individuals.
they know how to function as a whole instead of as individuals. If you were going to write the code to program some nanobots to produce this swarming effect for the military, for example. I'm SpaceX and I want to hire an architect to get my killer nanobots to behave this way. What's the code? What are the lines of code? Well, first of all, I'm not going to work for you. But okay, if you did, what would the lines of code be? Can you figure it out? Yes.
Each unit kind of has to move randomly, but they also have to be a certain distance away from each other.
The distance away from each other. So how do you write that equation?
They can't come in contact within, say, like, I don't know, 3 feet of the next bird or drone or whatever.
Okay. If distance is less than 3 feet,
Yeah.
let's say 1 foot. If distance is less than 1 foot, then turn away.
Yeah.
I think you got it. That's one line of code. What's a second line of code? Because if that's the only line of code, then
But it has to be a radius, like, they can't be far away from.
they can't be too far away. And imagine you're a starling and life is fragile and short. Why don't you want to be too far away? Anyone else? What's the problem with being on the edge of this block?
Or vulnerable to predators.
Yeah, right. So what's the second line of code? If you're at the edge, move towards the middle. I think we did it. 2 lines of code. And this is what we get. What do you think? Can we try that in Grasshopper and see what happens?
Yeah, I think it could be another one.
Okay,
You can migrate to another place. So you're moving
yes.
from one place to another.
Because that happens too, because at the end of every day, it turns out they need a place to roost for the evening.
You're trying to go to inside, not far away, but at the same time to move to one.
Right. There's also a general need to find a place to roost for the night. An engineer would say, oh, obviously, there's a fascist dictator in the middle here who's directing everything. Right? And maybe there is, but I don't think so. I think that part of the algorithm, the third line of code is, what about that place? What about that place? And once 16 or more birds all say, well, what about that place? Then the flock will move generally. So there's a third line of code that has to do, it takes into consideration that. Does that make sense? So so we're going deep into this flock of birds. And what we're doing is we're trying to reproduce the operating system, the rules of the system that are associated with this form. This is what architects do. Architects stare at things like this, and we decode the operating system rules that account for this form. Andrew Goldsworthy. He doesn't know what it's going to look like. He goes for long walks. Do you know Andrew Goldsworthy's work? Okay, now you do. He goes for walks and he says, oh, these sticks, this stick looks like this other stick. Oh, here's a third stick that looks like those two. I'm going to collect all the sticks that look like those sticks. Now what? He says, well, what do these sticks want? He asks of the sticks, hey, sticks, what do you want? What do you need? What is your destiny? And so he keeps questioning like this until this emerges. When he woke up in the morning, he had no idea what he was going to do. He did not conceive of the form and then produce it. He looked at the rules embedded in the materials that he had at hand, and the form emerged from the logic of the materials. The form emerged from the logic of the materials. Oh, look at these icicles. If I hold it, if I hold these two icicles together for 30 seconds, my fingers get really cold, but it's worth it because they fuse together. What do they want? Oh, they want this, he said. So he didn't know this was the form that was going to happen. He didn't design the form. The form emerged out of the logic of the materials. Here's one. What's going on here, architects? I asked the question to non-architects, and they said, oh, chaos. Totally random. There's no logic to this. So that's why I'm asking you, the architects, hey, architects, what's going on here? Do you see any forces that govern what's happening here? Any idea? Any guesses? Yeah.
It's, looks like there's, I don't know what it is, but it looks like rows that.
Yeah. There's some continuous routes here that look like circulation.
It also kind of looks like the form is taken from the materials. All they know the same thing.
Yeah, it could be that. And you notice this? You notice this pattern? You see it now? Like you stare at it long enough, you start to see patterns. You're behaving like architects, you're doing pattern recognition. Your brain-eye system is operating to decode and figure out what's going on. And what's this? You see that? What do you think that is? So at this point, you don't know what the forces are. Maybe it's material, maybe it's some other forces. If it's circulation, maybe it's the need to go from point A to point B. You have an instinct about the scale. You have an instinct about some of the forces. These are openings. If you came up and looked closely, you'd see these are openings. So maybe it has to do with light and air. Your instincts are telling you that this is not random. This is a system with a set of rules that have generated this form. And so there's a relationship between the operating system and the form, and the relationship between the form and the operating system. And there's an interplay between the two. And so in a way, that's the whole point. And we can now go into Islam as an operating system that produces a specific urban form, and an urban form that reinforces the rules and the norms and the values of the operating system. And we're not talking about capitalism anymore, which is so familiar and we take it so for granted that it's kind of invisible. Scientists have determined that fish do not even have a word for water. Fish have no idea that there's a thing called water because it's just so normal. They have no awareness of water. They don't even know how to talk about water. Until you take the fish out of water, suddenly they have a lot to say about the concept of water, right? So it's similar. The rules embedded in the operating system that we've been looking at all semester that are embedded and explain the world to us are hard for us to see. But when we look at starlings, or we look at sticks or icicles, or if we look at Islamic systems, all of a sudden, hopefully, we get it. There is a relationship between form and operating systems, and having that awareness is the key to being effective in our careers. So, Islamic cities, chaos or extremely complex, sophisticated ordering system. History of Islam, 610, the revelation of Muhammad, God's revelation to the Prophet Muhammad. He writes it down and it spreads over the next several centuries all over the world to the present, where it's the fastest growing religion in the world. We don't have time. When we look at cities and we see a building that is slightly tweaked off of the grid of every other building, what is that? Who knows about Islam? Who knows one of the basic rules of Islam? Geo.
All mosques have to like be directed towards like Mecca.
All mosques, yes, all mosques need to be, when we pray, and I'm using empathy voice, I'm not a Muslim, but as a designer, I'm obligated to try to understand and empathize with Islam. So when we pray 5 times a day, we face the Kaaba in Mecca, right? And that's one of the five requirements of Islam is prayer 5 times a day. Okay, and I face Mecca. So I always have to know where Mecca is. So my mosque is tilted towards Mecca so I can pray to Mecca. Okay, that's why Islam knew that the world was round, because they're obsessed. Islam is obsessed with the idea of which way is Mecca. Well, the world is round, so it changes depending on where we are. And so Christopher Columbus had no clue. He should have asked an Islamic scholar, an Islamic astronomer, an Islamic scientist. Okay, who can help us with the other 4 rules of Islam? This is a quiz. You studied it. What are the other 4?
It's charity.
Charity, zakat, right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And what is that charity? I have to help out poor Muslims? No, I don't have to help out poor Muslims? Who do I help out? Anyone?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I thought Islam was this closed mind. Wait, really? Anyone? That's so Christian of them. Actually, it's kind of, yeah, charity to whoever needs it. Is there a fixed amount that I'm expected to give?
Not really. Yeah.
It changes from
Yeah.
community to community. The one I lived in is 10%. You're expected to give 10% of your discretionary income to charity, not just for Islamic charity, but whoever needed it. What's number 3?
There's 5.
Hajj. What's that?
Going to Mecca, the Kaaba.
Once in your lifetime, if you can afford it, and maybe someone will help you out, you must make a pilgrimage. You're expected to make a pilgrimage to Mecca, where you circumambulate the Kaaba, and now you are Hajj. You have read that? Awesome. Okay, 4.
Number 1, but taking the Shahada.
Shahada,
Declaring, making a commitment.
right? Which goes something like this in English, please.
I don't know what it means.
We'll say it in Arabic then.
La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah.
I think what you're saying is there is no God but God, and Allah is his name. Okay? So it's like one God. It's like a, what would you call it? It's like a doctrine, but we repeat it all the time, right? There's only one God. His name is Allah. And what's number 5? Oh, oh. Ramadan? Oh, fasting. So what's the fasting? What's the deal for fasting?
Like,
During the month of Ramadan, I fast.
Yeah.
The whole month?
yes,
How come I don't die? I need food. I can't.
sunrise to sunset.
Oh, sunrise to sunset. So I fast while the sun is up. And at the end, when the sun goes down, what do?
Great.
Pray and then partay. Pray and then partay. Right? Party is you break the fast during that month. Okay? Everyone's ready? We've indoctrinated everyone. I don't want to get a call from the dean saying you're indoctrinating everyone to embrace Islam. No, we're just learning. These are the rules that are at the core of the urban form. Thank you, Samiha. So there's the mosque, and it's tilted. Again, David Macaulay, the second most famous graduate of RISD Architecture School, who never became an architect, David Macaulay. We looked at his Roman stuff. So there's the mosque, it's tilted. And there's the madrasa, and there's the market. So there's all kinds of the school. The madrasa is the school. So there's all kinds of elements that go into Islamic form. And yes, it does have to do with the materiality of this is a Turkish mosque model. But people don't realize that Islam started on the Arabian Peninsula in the town of Medina and spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula. It unified the previously warring tribes, and it unified them and then spread to between Spain and Indonesia by embracing local cultures and customs. It did not impose its architectural forms as it moved. It embraced whatever architectural forms were there. So in Turkey, it built on Roman forms, the arches and vaulting systems of the Romans, and became Byzantine, embraced the Byzantine practices of Byzantine architecture. And that's what we think of as the Turkish architectural model of Islamic architecture. But in North Africa, it's mud, Timbuktu, incredible mud buildings. In Southeast Asia, they took the Hindu-Muslim form of pyramidal roofs, 3 roofs stacked, and that's the form of the mosque in Southeast Asia. Everywhere it went, it embraced the local practices and customs. So you actually have a very diverse architectural formal arrangement, all reinforcing the same basic principles and rules. And a big part of Islam is privacy and modesty, especially for women, girls and women. And so the urban form has a lot to do with privacy and modesty. First of all, every home is a courtyard home, and doorways should not line up. Those of you who read the Hisham Murtada reading on traditional Islamic form, there are certain rules that are embedded in the Islamic religion, and it translates very directly into architectural form. Friends don't let friends line doors up across the alley. Friends don't let friends have one building taller than the other, because often our families in the hot weather, we sleep on the rooftops. So it's impolite to look down on someone else's roof. If you've ever heard the name of the town Fallujah, it's probably because you've heard about the bloodiest conflict of the Iraq War, And that's because the US troops didn't have anyone who took this class to tell them, wait, it's not cool to go up above and look down on rooftops. That was the reason Fallujah was like the most peaceful place in Iraq until the US military put its guns and surveillance locations on top of a school tower, looking down on the fabric. And then all hell broke loose and it became the bloodiest location of the Iraq War. And so these forms that are produced are very much a direct output of these rules of privacy, of protection. And the most important one is the courtyard house, which is interesting to us. We have something here in that is called the zero lot line development. So, and a party wall. So these are important principles. Party wall. That means I built my house first, I'm building a wall here. And then I'm building my house second. Thank you. I'm going to add a little bit of that wall, but it's basically one wall. And the property line goes through the middle of that wall. That's a party wall. And we do the opposite in the United States, especially in suburban contexts. Our building codes say you have to have a minimum setback from the rear, from the side, and the front. And so this becomes the buildable area. And so to maximize my investment, I build on this area and my windows are looking out like this. So what's the problem with that compared with this? This you build here, there are no windows on the outside. That's a problem. But all my windows face in. And so sophomore year, we used to give students, for the same reason we're looking at the Islamic City, we want students to understand the system that they're experiencing every day their entire lives by looking at the opposite system. So the sophomore year, we used to have students, instead of the antiquarian bookstore, can't remember what you guys did. What did you guys do? The antiquarian bookstore?
Yeah.
Oh wait, this was Studio 2. So Studio 2, you did the antiquarian bookstore?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in Studio 2, we used to do a courtyard house in Egypt so that students appreciate what the system is by seeing what the system is not. And so this is interesting. This is a system that promotes shade, but access to light and air, but it's cooler. In this system, there's a lot more chance for the sun to come down and heat up the house. So this system is more ecological. There's less cooling loads than this system. This system promotes privacy internally to the household. When you look out the window, you're looking at someone else in the same household. Whereas here, you better be pulling your shades all the time. Say, does that make sense? The courtyard versus the setback model. So we're going to look at that. But first to say, when the students at Columbia went off to look at this type of architecture, they needed to develop a new way of drawing. So this introduces a third component to the equation. So we were always talking about the operating system and form. And I want to bring in a method of representation that intervenes between the operating system and the form. And this is basically the happy place of the thesis program. In the thesis program, we will encourage you to develop an attitude of how you're generating form. What are the rules that you're using to generate the form. And in order to facilitate that discussion and that process between September and April of your graduate year, we want you to develop a specific method of drawing that supports that discussion of what's the relationship between the rules and the form. And this is a clear example. The Columbia students started when they were drawing plans. They started with the Noli map. Remember the Noli map? 1745 Rome. If it's private space, it drops to the background and it does not offer a great deal of detail. So as the drawing is saying, this is the context of the form, but don't look at that. It's there as a reference point. It's dropped. And then what gets popped? What gets popped are the spaces of the madrasa, the mosque, and the market, and the palace, the administrative offices of this mosque of Isfahan. It's popped and it's drawn in a way that represents the accessible spaces. These are the spaces that are available to us. They're not private spaces. Private spaces are dropped and not drawn. The spaces that are available to us, spaces that we experience moving through the complex, are popped. It's bigger ground. So that was the first innovation of the way we draw this operating system. The most innovative way to draw, these drawings are just quite amazing, but this is the way, and it's going to be hard to see. But because so much of this tradition, the Persian tradition of Islamic architecture, has a lot to do with the vaulting, the use of a square that is then turned 45 degrees, and that produces a vaulting system. This is the geometry at the core of an Islamic ornamental and structural practice. And it gets expressed in the vaulting that you can't really see from plan view. You can't really appreciate it in section view. You would have to do some tricky things with the axon to see it. Do you see what this drawing method is? What's different about this method of drawing? Especially you in the front. Can you see it? It's a worm's eye view. So architects, what they do is they go underground and they turn the planet transparent and they look up and they see the vaulted spaces from below. You wouldn't do that for this building because we don't care about the suspended ceiling. But you would do it for this because the thing that matters is the series of vaults, the structural acrobatics. So this is an example. There's an operating system that produces a form. These architects found it that they had to develop a method of drawing that was not conventional previously. And did we have worm's eye view? Yes. We use it for Gothic cathedrals as well. It's a very common use. No time for Jeffrey Bawa. So here's an example where we become aware of the operating system of Islam as soon as we take it away. So I had a student who took this class when I was teaching it at RISD, and he said, "Oh, I can present my home." And so he said, "Here's Kuwait City. Here's the British colonial ring road approach to expanding Kuwait City. Notice that the historic center has been bulldozed. Almost every brick that was stacked one upon the other was bulldozed in the name of modernizing Kuwait City. There's almost nothing left. Tragic. And so we zoom into his little district and then to his block and then his house. This is the old way of doing things where you see zero lot line development and a courtyard. As the lots get smaller, you start to get eccentric loading of the courtyard in these examples. But then something weird happened in the 1950s. They said, "Ooh, let's be modern. Let's make setbacks." And so they started to use setbacks. They said you have to set back 2 meters from the side of the lot line. So now you have 4 meters of space between the houses, and the houses get a lot smaller. Also, what happens to the privacy, the principles of Islam? Kuwait City, a lot of Muslims live in Kuwait City, and this is what you get. And so this is one of the things that architects from the Middle East and looking at the Middle East have been dealing with in the past few years, is how harmful and destructive it is to take the American dream overseas approach and apply it in other places. It does a great deal of harm. And so in response, they abandon all these setbacks, and we start to see new award-winning development that embraces the courtyard logic. And this is multifamily housing by Raj Alwal, famous Islamic architect who won the Aga Khan Award for architecture. But really interesting, and we've had students do thesis work around these rules, where courtyards are part of the logic of multifamily dwelling, and the issue of privacy is a really interesting architectural problem to work through. The variety of forms that all follow the same rules is a really interesting thing to do. And so the final thing has to do with, for those of you who read the Hisham Mortada piece, it's really interesting to look at the ecological roots of so much of what evolves in the Quranic tradition of the Hadith and the judgments. The judges hear these cases one after another, and they're constantly ruling that ecological systems need to be respected, and oppression is forbidden. You cannot be oppressive in what you do. And so this is an example in Morocco of these underground canals that are dug, that I was lucky enough to visit last year, that moves water. It simultaneously discovers the way water flows underground. So it's one part discovery. They discovered how water flows underground, and then they designed an intervention that takes advantage of the way water flows underground, harnesses it through these systems of kataras or kanat channels to irrigate lands and turn the desert into a very productive agricultural landscape. And so this is a very clear example of how the rules of nature were respected and built upon in these traditions. And then the final one has to do with passive cooling strategies that you're studying in passive and active systems. I don't know have you seen this in passive and active systems? But the ability of these underwater channels, if you circulate air through the underwater channels, the water will evaporate, and that will reduce the temperature of the water and the air. So the water evaporates. Yes, it becomes more humid, but the air is cooler. And the control of winds is a very powerful way to harness these natural forces. Okay, and wind towers. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
So did you download mine?
Yes.
Can you refresh that? I just included one image just to connect better with yours.
Oh, yeah. Just,
Yeah, guys.
okay.
Hey, guys. So I'm gonna talk about biomimicry. I don't know if you remember that we are trying during the semester that Robert addressed the history of specific kind of the city. And we together decided to pick a word, and I have to go as deep as I can with that word, which is a word that probably will help us to connect cities organism to our practice. So be prepared because my lecture today is have a lot of examples that you can take for your analysis. Is a very practical lecture. So I will start with a theory about biomimicry and then show several examples about how we can apply this to design. But before that, biomimicry is the replications or the mimic of the bio, of the nature. So just to understand where we are, I need you to tell me what comes to your mind when I say the word nature. What is nature for you? Oh, David.
Where things live.
Where it lives? Oh, so you say this is part of the nature? This is a thing.
Where things live.
Yeah, this is not living.
No.
Oh, okay. You're right. You're right. Where things live. Where things lives. Okay, so it's the environment where things live. I understand. What else? What comes to your mind when you say when they say nature? Where things live. It's good. Leon.
Like organisms and habitats,
Like what? Can you give me an example?
like a termite or an ant and an anthill, or any plant, animal.
Okay. So let me see, Maria. What is your favorite natural place in the world?
Oh, back home,
Sorry?
back home,
Back home. Can you explain that, please?
like, I don't know, I grew up on a farm.
Hey. Okay, you grew up in a farm. Okay, that's a natural environment. So, Grant, what is your favorite natural place?
I like the city.
Sorry?
I like the city. I like.
You like the sea, you don't like nature. That's good. Yeah, the grandson.
Or do you like nature in the city?
This is
City is nature.
is city nature? Are you agree with that? Yeah. So basically, biomimicry is a field that we are discovering now. It's quite recent. So you can look at this source. It's basically explaining how we can emulate nature, how we can see the favorite places, and we can emulate that through our design. So we love trees. We emulate trees because we have to be more natural. So if we have nature like this one, we can do an architecture that emulates this. And we do beautiful architecture that emulates nature. That is beautiful. Do you like this? We can do better, huh? Is this biomimicry? No, it's not. So we can do a little better. So then Frank Gehry do something like this one. Much better, huh? Have you been there? If you're going to Barcelona, visit this place. It's a beautiful canopy that mimic the fish in front of the beach in Barceloneta. Is this biomimicry? A little bit more, but not really.
Scales, maybe?
Maybe the scale, maybe the form, maybe you understand the logic of the bones of the skeleton of the beast to build your architecture, or you are really connected with architecture. Is this biomimicry? No. I have to say something. If you come with this idea for your analysis, you will fail, okay? I have to say that because that happened to us in other years. Oh, Professor Cho, Frank Gehry, we're doing that as an analysis. No, this is not really biomimicry. Biomimicry is how you understand in a better form the system that happens in nature. Do you know any other example? Can you tell me any example that emulates better the logic of the bio of the nature? I can show you one. That was what I just. So if you understand this is an urban ecology, this is similar to nature. I just borrowed that from Robert's lecture. So basically, so is this similar to the birds flowing around? It is. It is. So what we're trying to discover here is how we understand our relationship with nature and how we can emulate nature in a more consistent way. And one of the things that we have to do is how we can, instead of looking at the nature, is how we can understand that we can also part of the nature. So how we, and that's probably the core of this lecture, is how we understand that cities are part of the nature, our natural environment. If we understand that our interaction with the environment is part of the city, sorry, it's part of the ecology, it's part of the city. One of the things here is, I'm going to introduce one big theory here, which is political ecology by Bruno Latour, a great French philosopher. He said, one of the problems of sustainability, one of the problems that we can, it's very difficult to emulate nature, is that we are thinking in a radical division between natural environment and cultural environment. In our mind, development, the thing that architects do, is one part, and conservation of nature is another thing. So when we see natural environment in nature where organisms live, we never imagine that. So let me say that. If Daniel says that a natural environment is where organism lives, and we understand that we are organisms, so the city then is natural environment. Can you see that connection? If cities are places where organism lives, as Damien said, and we humans are organisms, and we live in cities, so cities are natural environment. Am I right? Are cities natural environment? Does that logic sounds clear to you? No, they are not. Are we a natural environment? Justin, are we a natural environment in this moment?
Yes, I know. Okay, I'm gonna give you two examples. At the beginning of time, we didn't have homes. We live under trees. So maybe the forest.
There was a time when we lived for the. Actually, that is next week. Week one. Yeah.
Okay. And how we have incorporated that in our life, the whole house buildings. So I would assume that would also make it part of our environment as well. Yeah, and not just nature like that. So.
Yeah, Demi.
So say if you lived in the woods, but like you're in a house in the woods, are you in a natural environment because you built the house that you're now living in? Is that still a natural environment?
I would, yeah. Is that a question for me? I would argue yes, and I'm trying to propose yes with this lecture. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd say quick revision to the city example, or I guess just habitats. Instead of saying habitat or nature is a place where organisms live, you could say it's where the organisms actually have a say in how their environment is produced. So in a city, you have like some urban planner just coming through, like in the last lecture, this producing swaths of housing. You know, nobody who might have lived there had any say in that. They were just making houses for profit.
Yeah.
But maybe it could start to approach nature if the inhabitants.
Yeah, probably that is the core. So because what he says is that the cities are for profits and they're transforming the ecosystems. And probably if we focus the center in other place, we can be more ecosystem. So actually what Bruno Latour proposed is how we can create a space for a theory that combines development of culture and conservation of nature, and how we can find a way where everything comes together. Actually, he said that one of the problems is that we understand nature as an environment. Let me explain that. an environment is something that surrounds us. It's around us. It's there. It's not here. So we surround the environment. It's the setback model. So we are here, and from here we look and control the environment. How we can find something different? And actually, what he proposed is a theory that, or a discipline that tries to integrate society and nature as a combined thing. How we can create or reject the concept that culture and nature are things that are completely different. And basically that rejects the idea of natural environments as bucolic things that are there to contemplate the beauty. So one of the issues that Bruno Latour challenged is understanding that nature is something that is there just to be observed and contemplated. So what is nature then? So following that, Timothy Morton proposed that we can have an ecology without that romantic nature. So how we can imagine an ecology that is not completely related to this romantic nature that I showed in my previous slide. So and that comes back to our first lecture. If you remember our lecture of climate, remember that we were discussing that ecology is the relationship between organism and environment, which means that we are here in an ecological system. Everything that we produce here is affecting the natural environment. Everything that you are doing here is part of the natural system because we produce waste and we consume energies that are related to that environment. What I'm trying to do here is to challenge the idea that nature and culture are something that are completely separated because the systems connects them in the process that we use, consume, and exchange values. So what he proposed is that he challenged this idea that development is part of the cultural and involves humans, and conservation is part of the natural that involves animals. And the beauty of Bruno Latour is he also includes the logic of democracy in this discussion. Let me explain that. We were discussing a lot about democracy in the last weeks. If you remember well, we don't have time to open a discussion to remember what is democracy. But if you remember well, and listen to me, because this is very important that you understand. This is my third opportunity. If you understand this concept, you will understand the following. Democracy is at the end, including the voice of different entities, different people, being multicultural. Multiculturality is at the core of democracy. You can include the variety of people and the variety of cultures into the system, into the governance of the system. So at the end, development is multicultural. We need to have multiculturalism in order to be democratic. Are you following me with that? You cannot have democracy without multicultures, different entities, including immigrants, living together in the same system. This is at the core of democracy. But at the same time, we perceive nature as one thing. So we are building systems that tries to be multicultural, but mononatural. We have only one nature because the nature is one thing that is there. So what is trying and what Bruno Latour says is that we understand the natural environments as one thing, or natural systems are one thing that is in the environment, and we do not belong to them. So that is the core of extraction, of extractivism. Because at the end, natural environment is something that is there. We do not belong to them. We build houses with setbacks to control the nature. And this natural environment as there is one thing that is basically providing us resources for our consumption. So basically, in the system we have so far, and this is basically the success of the 20th century, is that we understood that natural environment are one thing that we extract to support democracy. So what I'm doing here, that it sounds like a contradiction because we are building democracy and we need to extract resources from this only one type of nature in order to build the multiculturalism that we have here. Again, I'm still with Bruno Latour. And what he says that why we do not believe that instead of having, is in addition to having multicultural environments, we have multi-natural environments. We can understand we have different types of nature. If you understand that you can be multiple types of culture in order to be democratic, probably if you have multiple types of nature, you can be democratic here as well. And this is where we build the idea of ecosystemic democracy. This idea sounds weird for us who live in Boston, but what he says is that we can include the voice of non-humans into the democratic decision. And that's the question, how we include the voice of non-humans into democratic decisions. And probably if you understand that everything that we do in our societies affect also non-humans, we can understand that including their voice, we can be more ecological and more democratic. This is the core. And this is what he called political ecology and ecosystemic democracy. Any questions so far? Yeah, Diego.
Do you think homogeneous societies can be democratic?
You think, say that again?
Do you think homogeneous societies can be democratic?
The most of them would exchange, say?
Sorry, what?
Say that again, sorry.
Do you think homogeneous societies can be democratic?
Yeah, I don't know, honestly, yeah. But the point of him is trying to understand how we spread or broaden the voice of different organisms, talking about the serious organism, into decision making, not only also into the design decisions, how we integrate them. I know that this sounds weird again, but I was in Uruguay 2 weeks ago, and we go there, communities tells you the land talks. We can listen to the land talking. Actually, today, Robert did it. Just analyzing the way the birds move, we can decodify the way they are talking. They are talking to us. Probably natures are not talking in the same way that I talk, and the same way we talk, but they are saying things. And if you talk with, for example, indigenous people from Abenaki culture, we will talk with, some of you will be working with Abenaki culture in Studio 7. They say that the core of saving the planet is listening the land, literally listening the land, and say what they are trying to say and integrate that voice into our decision making. Are you seeing? Are you following the game changing here? So what he says that at the end, everything is so you, instead of having infrastructure, you need to have a living infrastructure and understand that there is multiple forms of addressing nature, so we can have conservation, rehabilitation, other forms of integrate the logic of the nature into the systemic relations that we have between culture and between culture and nature, and between humans and non-human. What basically the core here is to understand that we have a living infrastructure. So instead of having a highway where only non-humans can live, what we are proposing is we don't have another type of infrastructure where humans and non-humans can live. So where humans and non-humans can live together, because at the end they are all quite related in different ways. So we have multiple type of living infrastructure that connect everything, creating an ecosystem of relations where everybody comes together. When I say everybody, when humans and non-humans comes together. So if you like this topic, I suggest you a book by Edward Comte that says, the book is called When Forests Talk. So how you can listen to the forest and integrate their voice into decision making, but also into your design decision. Do you think this is too abstract? It's too weird to say that forest talk and animal talks, and we can integrate their voice. I want to listen from you if you think this is too abstract. Just to demonstrate that it's not abstract, my purpose today is to show you several examples about living infrastructure. but because what we are trying to understand that the natural system that we have today are not pristine, they already have interventions. We are living in a second nature. So this book says basically that the first nature that we have in the world was before civilization. Few years ago, before civilization, we have this natural environment where non-humans can live, but this romantic nature where humans have no intervention disappeared when after civilization. Now we're living in a second nature where everything that we have in the world has intervention by us. So we have been, I don't know if you remember first lecture by Robert there with the anthropocentric era. So everything that we have in the world has intervention by the world. And then when these groups proposes, why don't we imagine a third nature where we can live together with a better type of harmony, and where human and non-humans are both integrated into democratic decisions. So I'm going to skip this one. So, but obviously, one of the core here is start to forgetting this fake dichotomy between cities and non-cities, between nature and culture, between farms and cities, understanding that everything is part of the same ecosystem. There are different forms of third or second nature, but every part of the world is urbanized and have cultures and nature at the same time. So, because I want to narrow down today with some pragmatic decisions, I want to recommend you these 3 books that propose specific tools about how you can design living infrastructures, means design decisions that helps you to integrate the voice of the nature into your design, the voice of the ecosystem into your design. And especially, I want to show you today, I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to show you today this book that I suggest you to download if you are planning to design for nature. It's basically called A Catalog of Natural-Based Solutions by the World Bank 2023. So they decided to hire a group of architects from the Netherlands. It's not casual, there are many people, many Dutch in this class. But yeah, there are people from the Netherlands, and they decided to create this catalog of different type of interventions about how you can integrate nature into your design, into your urban design solutions. And they're creating a method that in order to be sustainable, you have to understand how processes of nature are integrated to create different functions like flood regulation to benefit for people, and it will add to benefit also non-humans. And in order to have more natural-based solution. This is part of the catalog. And one of the beautiful things is that they understood that we are living in an ecosystem that works all together. Even if we're designing in a town located here called close to the river, this could be Boston. All of this is quite connected in while what they call the basin, I'm gonna skip this one, while they call the river basin scale. So this is also part of that book. So you have different ecosystems between the upland forest until the water, and even if you have different moments of cities, everything is part of the same ecosystem. And so I want to come back a little bit with the history. This book is from 2023. They are not the first one who say this. So that was the very, very famous book by Patrick Geddes, Cities in Evolution. And this is his famous valley section. What he said in 1915 is that you have the valley section, and between the upland and the river and the sea, you have different type of ecosystem, different types of nature, but at the same time, different type of tools and different type of labor. So there is a close connection between labor, tools, and nature. and how these change depending of the place where you have in the environment. And that comes back from one guy, in my opinion, was one of the geniuses of the history of humanity, Alexander von Humboldt, this German botanist. He created this idea that he called, who speaks French, German here? Nobody. So he said Naturgemalde, which is basically the and that was 1807. So Alexander von Humboldt, he was traveling around the world, and he went to a wilderness in Ecuador called Chimborazo. And he discovered that when you are moving up in the mountain, you discover different type of ecosystem. But what is fun is he also traveled to Switzerland, and he discovered that you have similar type of vegetations in the different levels in Ecuador than in Switzerland. So because the way you distribute vegetation, for example, in nature, are not related to the location or to the altitude. And that was a big discovery. So he discovered that it's a relation between the nature, between the topography and the nature, and he discovered this, he brought this systemic relation of vegetation following the different levels of the mountain. That is particularly beautiful because in the past, vegetation used to be classified like fragments. So botanists love to fragment species about different types. He said that should be more classified by geography. He started to connect geography with and topography with different type of nature. And this is exactly what these guys are doing today in 2023. How you can classify different ecosystems. And now we have natural and urban ecosystems at different levels. So following that idea, they also have the same concept at different scales. So you can have different ecosystems at the scale of the top of the region. You have the different ecosystems at the scale of the neighborhood. And if you can download that again for you see that you have green walls, green roof, how you can have different interventions at the scale of the neighborhood in order to reinforce the introduction of nature or the reinforcement of nature within cities, and also the scale of the street. So how you can have infiltration, soil cleaning, water collection, cooling effects, and other systems that you integrate into your street and at the street scale in order to reinforce the introduction of nature into your urban design proposals. So, and the other beautiful thing that they did is that they understood that we have different type of ecosystems between urban forests and mangroves, and they explained that instead of designing a general introduction of nature, you have to understand how the ecosystem works, and understanding the ecosystem, you have different type of design interventions. It's basically listening the ecosystem, listening the echo, listening the non-humans environments, and integrate that into your design decisions. So I'm gonna go down. I have 15 minutes. Fasten your seatbelts because I will show you one example of each one of current project of architects that are doing great job trying to build living infrastructure in order to introduce. Some of them are better than others, I have to say. But there are some architects that are trying to introduce the logic of the ecosystems into their design decisions. So I'm going to start with first one is the idea of the urban forest. So this is pretty normal. Why we think that the forest should be something that is outside of the city, or we're not including the city urban forest. So this is in Utrecht, 2022 by Felix. They understood the whole neighborhood as a forest and something that is beautiful. So this is a street. So they are planting. I think this is orange or lemon. I don't remember in the street. Actually, if you want to research about that, there is a new field in urban design called edible landscapes. Why do not design landscapes that include edible pieces that you can used not only for to provide food, but also to build community. So in this street, you frequently see people going outside and gathering in front of their street to pick up oranges as a community. And this is basically a Saturday activities. So they decided to do a forest, but this forest was not a cluster that is isolated. The street itself is a forest. And there are other parts that are more traditional forests, and they build this type of landscapes where this bridge is separated from the landscape in order to allow other non-humans species moving around. Sometimes what happens with infrastructure that they block the journey of non-humans. How you can, for example, in this case, elevate the structure. In this particular case, you have another ecosystem below, and you go up to enjoy what is happening in this particular part. Sometimes that works. And also they included participatory designs. It was designed through the intervention of human. There is one strategy that participatory meetings of ecosystemic democracy is working now. It's trying to integrate in the participatory meetings. Remember that I was talking about participation 3 weeks ago. Includes experts in biodiversity. And then you ask that guy, okay, if you were a squirrel, what you will say? And that becomes like diplomats. They were like, you have a representative democracy built with participatory democracy, and you have a guy who represents non-humans when you are taking some decisions to be sure that at least an expert that understands the logic can be the voice of non-humans into decision making. And so this is slopes. This is the worst example of all the list. So this is a group of architects who tries to design their project, understanding the levels of these particular communities, and the whole project was basically trying to negotiate with the slopes to open spaces for gardening, where you were building the project as a way to connect two different parts of the city. This is in a self-produced environment in Caracas to connect this part of the city with a facility that is on top. So how you can use the slopes, not to go against them, but to work with them in order to build a system of connections that also create gardenings on community gardens and spaces for non-humans, and create different courtyards on different levels to where other tools like roof gardens and are integrated into the urban landscape. Do you like this, Roman?
I love it.
It's a group. They're not that bad.
They're great. They're my heroes.
Yeah. So there is another a water course. Actually, Nassim, I used this example for her assignment 2 weeks ago. There was one case that they decided why we can have. This is similar to the Big Dig, but a little more natural. Sorry. So the Big Dig project it's a natural environment that is highly domesticated. In this case, they decided to remove this highway to create and to split this highway into 2 levels. So there was a TOD, transit-oriented development strategy, including the creation of different levels of mobility that opens a huge space for a new natural environment where you open the water. And this is another key, if you want to design for nature, is to understand that water shouldn't be hidden. Water is there to be seen, to be enjoyed. And also, there are many researches that demonstrate that the water is open. You can also have more control of flooding, because you can see what is happening, and you can control in this section, for example, where you can flow, where the water can flow in order to prevent that the floods goes where you don't want it to go. So, so this is that example. Is that the same example that you work with, Nassim? Am I right? Yeah. You can also I love this example because I'm an architect. It's basically understanding that we can also do buildings the more traditional way, but they are more impactful, they have more empathy, and that can help and behave more as an ecosystem. In this case, they are trying to create a bridge on top of this highway to connect these 2 communities. And these connections are not only through hardscape, but also to softscape. So if you're a human, you can come here, but if you're not, you can come here. So you have this interaction. And so, do we have sound today? So these are some of the detailed example. No, we didn't put, I forgot that. I should just look at there because one of the beauty of this image, try to imagine that. Can you listen to that? So it's yeah, if you look at that in your phone and in your computer, you'll see that what you listen is the sound of the birds, the sounds of non-humans. It's a space that it's a space to be quiet, to enjoy the nature, and you can listen and see the interaction of ecosystem just close inside the city. Who's having that? Are you? You listen to that? This is also the sound of the city. This is green spaces, and how you can create green spaces also too, with green roof, with water tanks, with water collectors that you combine human activities with people activities, and with a lot of floodplains to remediate flooding, but also to use these floods as a way of enjoyment. So again, the city could have the solution to introduce nature into with different taxonomies outdoor to create this type of a moment where this water is the water that helps to prevent flooding in other parts of the city, but at the same time create this green space for communities' enjoyment. And yeah, this is in Bangkok. Or one other example that connects with 2 lectures ago is transit-oriented development. Believe me or not, transit-oriented development is considered a natural-based solution. Even if you don't include a tree, it's a natural-based solution because you're trying to reduce carbon emission in order to improve pedestrian and biking and reduce journeys. So the catalog of the World Bank suggests you to have transit-oriented development, sometimes with green street, but sometimes with not, in order to have more friendly or more environmentally friendly projects. Urban farming. So Maria, your hometowns could be within Boston. It's how you introduce the farming within the city, the edible landscape as a way to introduce the city. We have several community gardens. In one of the best projects in here in Boston. In this case, is Kivera. They used to have this landfill. I don't say, I don't know. Yeah, it's a landfill. It's a landfill. They transformed that into a community garden and use also the classification of garbage to not only produce energy but also to produce compost. It was a huge project in Kivera that radically changed the way, and also they are using vertical landscape because and they are helping that community to produce their own food. And so when you have time, look at this.
Residents supported by international NGO, the Human Needs Project, are making possible what seemed out of reach. They have ventured into urban farming. They had to find solutions to challenges including a lack of proper sanitation and scarcity of water that make farming a difficult venture in Kibera. David Omari has adapted a soilless medium. He uses Paris, a volcanic rock.
So we are using what we call the waste product, of which these are the things which come from the yogurt, those cups of the yogurt. So we are using it, we put in the humus, of which comes from the volcanic type soil or a rock from my mind. So this one, you know, that's what some communities is clear and makes the work easier because you can not grow some weeds.
The use of hydroponic methods is helping Kibera's urban farmers maximize space for both.
You got the point. So, and this is happening at different scales with different locations, different budgets. So we have biorotation. Biorotation is becoming a very important tool in cities, also to not only to prevent, but also to mitigate effects of climate change. So this is in Denmark, and they have this space. I hope that you can design. Actually, next semester you will be in Studio 7. I hope that you can take these examples again and implement them in the case study that you were redesigning. So if you see is how you increase the amount of softscapes to have spaces for bioretention and retention of water. When you have a hardscape, they use these tools that collect water and everything is collected to irrigate the same system. So you reuse the water that is around to build the ecosystem around this public space. And yeah, bioretention is another very important tool. These are the umbrellas that I told you that help them connect water. So you are collecting water here to the soil and collecting water here to this tool, because you need also hardscapes for people to gather. And you have wetlands. Wetlands are disappearing in the world, and we are discovering that the reason because erosion is happening in the rivers is because we remove wetlands around the world. So there are many projects around the world that are trying to rebuild the wetlands, which is these transitions between the land and the water, and that landscape helps you to prevent erosions downstreams. And you can have different types. This is only one because I think it's a beautiful design of a wetland. And also how you can work with floodplains. Understand that there are moments where you have landscape that have different level of water depending on the time, and you design the landscape in order to have these two moments coexisting in different time of the year. And this is Jihuan City. This also helped you to create this landscape that connects two different parts of the city, for people in these directions, but for non-humans in this direction. So all of these examples have their link below, right? So if you want to look at them in more level of details, go here. You can take that for your future projects. These are just examples. This is a basic, just having this a little above the level of the ground allows other animals to move around. So this is a living infrastructure with these guys respect in some ways the life of non-humans. Also, this could be also fun and beautiful. And I think this is the last one, mangroves. So mangroves are also being restored in many parts of the world. This is an example from Miami, that basically they discovered that rebuilding the coral reefs can help to prevent the impact of flooding into urbanization. So how the interaction between a new urban infrastructure, this is an urban infrastructure that people are building, help them to create different layers of prevention to avoid the impact of climate change. And yeah, this is a map of mangroves around the world. And this is how it's also happening in Gazi Bay, Africa. And there's a community rebuilding with, especially this is a woman intervening, this is a woman of the community rebuilding the mangroves to prevent erosion of their land. And they have a classification of different type of, a taxonomy of different type of species that should be located in order to remediate these mangroves between the village and the town. And that was completely bottom-up driven by this organization at the moment. At the end, and this is, I have two last images after giving you the voice. So these are basically organizing these different types of strategies, like infiltration, water reuse, and they have processes that have certain functions and benefits. And they create an indicator and a taxonomy about how you can organize these type of tools in your ecosystem to rebuild the urban, or sorry, to build living infrastructure that are more based on the nature across the whole river basin scale. So, across the whole river basin. So what I was trying to do today is to demonstrate that there is a theory about the integration of non-humans into decision and design, and some examples that make that real. And I hope that you can come with other better examples for Tuesday. So, guys, you have to, yeah, okay. Yeah, please. We're almost there, so we're listening. Kevin, Alejandrina.
Cover your for a moment.
So overall, I think that we're able to answer a lot of these questions with the lecture. I think that because a lot of these questions were so tied together, a lot of what we learned was able to answer multiple at the same time. So I guess just starting off with like a few, right? Like, what does it mean to design cities as a single organism? I think the way I thought of it was kind of just designing with, it's like a single like guiding like design principle. Like that's very like, I guess like overall, like kind of going back to the Islamic designing where they kind of just use like the Quran and their traditions as a base for how they design, and it ended up being embedded into their urbanists to consider urban design. Another one would be, how do we design cities for all beings, not just people? So I like what Ignacio had to say about like, think about it like if you were a squirrel, like what would you have to say, right? And I guess it just kind of comes down to just taking, other living things into consideration and just thinking about, if you were the squirrel, how would you feel about huge road being in the way, or at least like having some way of being able to move. How can cities behave can cities behave as ecosystems? I would say yes, but we need to, reimagine the way that we go about, constructing them, and just really just working more in unison rather than just having, multiple, different things going on. So.
I think connecting to like what Kevin just said, like I think that's how we also kind of answer how can past Islamic models help us build more sustainable cities. And I think that kind of like sets the basis for like a lot of these questions, like working in uniform, like Kevin said, and like seeing things as like one whole. Looking at like the project that Ignacio showed us with like the birds chirping, I feel like that was like a moment like if you don't hear birds chirping like in a city, you feel kind of like detached from everything. I feel like if I didn't hear like any animals or different like sounds going on, I would feel like there's a moment where like we're too busy in life and just really disconnected from everything.
Yeah, I think that kind of just answers everything. So like how can cities change our desire to live in nature or satisfy our desire to live in nature? Just implementing things like the living ecosystem and changing the way that we design through things like elevated structures to allow like those non-human like animals and all of those things, I think is a good way to incorporate building or designing those cities and satisfying like every being that there is.
Another good way of doing that would be like that example where we had like the forests being a part of like the street. Like you actually had things like growing like roots and things like that. So it's like, it actually feels like it's a part of it and not just like it's placed into it,
So if we get a chance to encourage you to dig deeper, I think this is a really important one. I think this one is very pragmatic. It's like, how can we reshape suburban ideals? Do we have to bulldoze the suburbs? Do we have to abandon the suburbs? Or what can be done to build on this operating system that was put in place so successfully over the past 100 years? How can we afford to just abandon it, or what can be done? What examples indicate what can be done in suburbs? Owen Dunham Jones is the name that you might want to look into. But the biggest one that I feel like is going to be a big part of the final week of the course, that just kind of overarches everything here, really is can we alter the operating system rules of cities so that they operate more like ecosystems and less like extractive capitalist engines of growth that does not consider devastation of natural systems and is okay with oppression. Like and Islam is cool as a model because it was not okay with devastating ecosystems. They had rules against that. And oppression was simply not allowed. You can't oppress, it's just not allowed. And the operating system, do they have market forces? Do they have profit? Yes, they do. Thank you very much. Islam thrives economically without giving free rein to oppression and devastation. So I think that this is the one, if you guys can give us examples of this. And it's worth pointing out that some of these things are being put into the current operating system. It used to be that facility on Wentworth campus collected the raw sewage of this part of Boston and pumped it right into Boston Harbor. That was the former operating system. The new operating system, no, everything is treated out there on Deer Island. And now we have city after city saying our municipal rainwater systems can handle this amount. Now we've upgraded, we expect the new design storm is something like 5 or 6 inches of rain in 24 hours. So every design you guys produce, you have to comply with the additional amount of rainfall, even though the world record in Boston for the biggest rainfall is lower than the new design standard. We're expecting so much more rainfall in Boston in the coming years that the new design standard says you have to design landscaping that retains that water on site. So these things are being written into the codes. The codes are being rewritten to support better ecosystem, in this case, aquifer recharge. And so it's happening. How can we succeed in that context? How can we accelerate it? Okay, we went over time.
Yeah, see you on Tuesday. Take care.
Okay, thank you, everyone.